All right, guys. So let's take a look at the interview with Reverend Al Sharpton and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, I've not seen any of this yet. I've not watched any reviews on it at all. All right. So let's go and check this out, y'all.
Welcome back to Politics Nation. According to a brand new Wall Street Journal poll out today that was conducted entirely after the first Republican presidential debate and mostly after the release of Donald Trump's Fulton County mugshot, the former president holds a whopping 46-point lead over Florida Governor Ron DeSantis among GOP primary voters, 59 to 13%. My next guest is also somewhere on that list, but with much less support, with 5%. Joining me now is 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. First of all, thank you for being here and engaging us in this conversation. I want to start with comments you made repeatedly now, referring to Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and author Ibram Kendi as, quote, grand wizards of the modern KKK. Now, I understand you differ with both of them politically and probably with me. But as a graduate of Harvard and Yale universities, I believe you must be aware the Ku Klux Klan is not a political party. It's a terrorist organization. Historians view the Klan as the driving force behind lynchings of blacks in the American South, more than 4,000 people murdered from 1877 to 1950. And the group is linked to numerous other acts of racial violence continuing through the civil rights movement to the present day. You're running to be the leader of the free world, so your choice of words matter. Have you taken any time to reflect upon the possibility that comparing your political rivals to murderous terrorists might put their lives in danger at a time when hate crimes are on the rise? Or do you just don't care?
So Reverend Sharpton, I don't look at the world through political parties. Frankly, it's good to see it's been 20 years since we last spoke. And part of the reason that I came to that event 20 years ago with you is that you were a political outsider just like I am in my own party. But let me talk about the issue you're actually asking about, which is that, you know, what's toxic about that old worldview of organizations like the KKK, which have been a god-awful stain on our national history, is that they say that your skin color determines what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think. To say you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told because you're black or brown skinned. Well, you know what Ayanna Pressley said much more recently is that we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. And so, yes, I do think there are echoes of a historical ugly racism in this country now showing up in new clothing.
To say we
and
don't
what I want to lead us to as the next president
just a second.
is a
to say
united
that we
nation
do not want
where we
black
don't actually
voices,
judge each other on the color of our
to
skin.
say that is not going with sheets and burning crosses and lynching people. If she said something you disagree with,
the point I'm making,
you cannot equate Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan with somebody saying something that you think is a little controversial or a little too far. Some of our relatives were terrorized by the Ku Klux Klan. I'm trying to get you to understand the pain of that.
I know you're intellectually honest. I know you're an intellectually honest guy, and so I will remind you that Hakeem Jeffries drew analogies between Donald Trump and the Ku Klux Klan, and I don't think you had him on pressing him in the same way. So we're drawing analogies here to make a point.
He did not call Donald Trump the grand dragon of the KKK. He did not call Donald Trump an officer of the modern KKK. Let's not change what was said.
So, Reverend Sharpton, though, I'm calling out a double standard and saying that certain people can use certain analogies to make a point. Well, I'm using an analogy to make a point. And the point I'm making is we should stop seeing each other on the basis of our skin color. It was god-awful when the KKK did it. But you know what? We have to learn a lesson in the present that we're creating more racial division in this country.
But you
when
cannot
you say if you have black skin, you can only think one thing.
You cannot do it being insensitive to our feeling. Like, that's that's like calling somebody of any kind of group that had a group that were terrorizing.
So I agree
and
with you. We
killing
need
them.
sensitivity.
So I think we need to be very careful about that. And I wanted to raise that with you directly. Let me go to my next point.
And I respect that you're willing to have an open conversation.
But I want to ask you a
country.
couple of questions. And one thing, if you talked, you mentioned we talked 20 years ago, and I'm going to get to that, but you should have known 20 years ago. You're not going to out-talk me, so let me ask my question. I'll let you talk, then I'll go back to the next point.
Goes both ways, yeah.
All right. You've spoken out against affirmative action and diversity programs, even though it is a reporting in Axios and elsewhere have produced evidence. Your own former company has been involved in various DEI and ESG initiatives.
So look, affirmative action is something I know very little about. From what I do know, it seems like it intends to bridge the gap a little bit. All right. And if that's all it's doing, then I don't think it's a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Whatever gap might still exist between black and white should be looked at. You know what I'm saying? Because we should be as close to equal ground as possible. Right? That's the whole equality thing. Right? Then on top of that, there's another element. And that is class gaps. Right? And that's another area that would also help, any group of people that is struggling to survive. All right? It's as simple as that. As far as the first talking point, I will agree slightly with Vivek, right? It definitely is wrong to say that, black voices should speak for this, or they should speak for that, or we don't want them, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter about your heritage or whatever else, you have the right to your opinions. You do not have to fall in line with a certain criteria, or they say, we don't want you to have a platform now. That's not right. Your opinions are still valid, even if, one side or the other thinks they're not valid. They're still valid. Everyone still has the right to have their opinion. Right? That is not wrong. You can always, critique their opinions if you think their opinions aren't based in fact or logic or whatever else. But you shouldn't ever say to anyone that, well, because you're black and you see things this way, that means you're not really black, or you shouldn't have a voice, right? That's not okay. That type of mentality is of a mindset that we need to live in echo chambers. I don't like any outside forces that's conflicting with my reality. So I just need to shut those voices up. That's not okay. If you're a political figure and you have to be in echo chambers in order to be comfortable, you're not a very good politician. Right? And that is something that we're seeing more and more of. Right? And it is getting very old.
Your own companies, DEI, diversity. I would hope we can agree that historically many communities of color have not enjoyed the same socio-economic benefits as white Americans. And many of those disparities persist to this day. What specifically would you do as president to address that problem, keeping in mind your own company got diversity business?
Yeah, so I want to be very clear about that. after I stepped down as CEO, precisely to speak my mind freely, the company that I founded went the direction of most companies in corporate America. And I disagree with that decision. But you're asking a more important question about what are we going to do to ensure equality of opportunity in this country. You're right. We have been an imperfect nation. I've always said it. But we aspire towards perfection. How do we go that next step? I want to make sure kids aren't trapped in the ghetto of a zip code that they happen to be born in. To the contrary, I think every parent deserves to have the opportunity to send their kids to the best possible school. That's why I favor radical school choice in this country. I think it's a mystery, Reverend Sharpton. The very people who will wax eloquent about systemic racism are also the ones who are opposed to educational mobility. That's why I've said shut down the U.S. Department of Education. Use that $80 billion. Put it in the hands of parents so they can actually send their kids to that best possible school they can. That's the actual civil rights issue of our time. So I stand for solutions. I stand for equality of opportunity. But I reject race-based quota systems.
I did not go to Harvard, but I know when a question is not answered. I did not ask you about education. I asked you about diversity in business. I asked you about a company you headed getting DEI. How do we deal with
here's what I'm against.
Wait a minute. Let me ask the question again. How do we deal with the economic disparity in businesses of color and people of color in the economic arena? You ran the school choice, good duck, but wrong show. Deal with the economic. You're a businessman.
It's actually related. You know, I know you're smarter than this to know that education leads to economic prosperity. So there's no Band-Aid fix.
But that's not the specific question he asked. He wasn't talking about education. He's talking about businesses. All right. So I feel like at this point, Vivek is kind of like trying to split hairs. You know what I'm saying? Just answer the question he's asking about businesses.
You know, I know you're smarter than this to know that education leads to economic prosperity. So there's no Band-Aid fix.
But after you're educated, we have educated people that can't get contracts. We have educated people that have no problem with being educated that can't get contracts. How do you deal with the inequality in how they do business in this country, how they get jobs? That's where the DEI programs come from.
So I understand where they come from. I'm against it because it causes us to see one another on the basis of our skin color. I can tell you from personal experience, I have hired, both in businesses I've founded, even in this campaign, people who are black executives who have, I think, been unfairly judged. I put them in those positions because of merit. Other people at the companies and otherwise have seen those people as getting that position because of racial quota systems.
All right.
That is wrong, no matter.
Now, here's one thing I'd like to say. If that's your opinion, you need to be able to back that up. You know what I'm saying? That there are actually people who are getting positions that someone else was more qualified for, but that they're getting them because of their skin color. All right. You need to be able to back that up. You can't just say, well, a lot of people of this, race are getting these positions, right? You need a lot more than that. But I understand the critique of it. But if you're going to say that that's a fact, then where's the proof? If not, then it's just a theory. Then it's just, let's make sure they are hiring based on merit and not based on anything else. Simple as that.
Whether you're black or white,
many of them
we need to go back
because
to colorblind meritocracy. That's what we need in this country. That's how I've led the companies I've built. That's how I will lead this country. Colorblind meritocracy. That's what we need.
Were barred and had the merit. But since you talked about experience, I need to show you this tape.
Yeah.
Back in 2003, when I ran for president and you were there to ask me a question at a forum that I was doing at Harvard University. So 20 years later, now my turn to ask.
Yeah.
Let me first play you the tape of you and I 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Good. Let's get to my question here. Go ahead. Reverend Sharpton, hello. I'm Vivek, and I want to ask you, last week on the show we had Senator Kerry, and this week and the week before we had Senator Edwards. And my question for you is, of all the Democratic candidates out there, why should I vote for the one with the least political experience?
Well, you shouldn't, because I have the most political experience. I got involved in the political movement when I was 12 years old. And I've been involved in social policy for the last 30 years. So don't confuse people that have a job with political experience. So 20 years later, now my turn to ask you, of all the Republican candidates out there, why should someone vote for you, the one with the least political experience? And I might add, you've never held office. You've only voted twice.
That's correct.
In the last few elections. You don't even vote regularly.
Yes.
And you support Donald Trump, who never held office until he was president. Well, you putting a different standard on me, but I won't even make the racial application there. Why should we vote for you?
Listen, at the age of 18, I think you persuaded me on that one, that political experience is not the same as holding office. To tell you the truth, the reason I came out there and I was intrigued.
Can I put out right-wing press that Sharpton converted a young, well, I don't want to take credit for
to believe outside of political experience, I'm going to tell you the truth. One of the things, I'll even give you one more for you, okay? You were the only anti-war candidate back then. I was against the Iraq War. As I recall, you were the only anti-war candidate in either party. Well, guess what? Tables turn now. I'm the only true anti-war candidate in either political party now when it comes to Ukraine. I believe in America First policies. I think this Ukraine war does not advance American interests. I was the only person with the courage to say that on the Republican debate stage last week. The real war I would take on is the war against the administrative state, the shadow government here at home. I think the people who we elect to run the government, once again, ought to be the people who actually run the government, not the cancerous bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.
Here's what I'm going to say about that. You know the motto, you never leave a man behind. It's as simple as that. That is at the core of American values. All right, you don't leave your man behind. Now, and that goes for any ally of the United States. We are supposed to treat them as if they are our own. It's as simple as that. And if we get to a point to where we say, you know what, all of our allies can just look out for themselves, that's where you get to a huge problem. All right. Because at that point, other countries who used to be our allies, they just might turn on us. And we don't need that. You know what I'm saying?
I'll have a 75% headcount reduction for all of the people who weren't elected in Washington, D.C. So this is a very different vision than you hear amongst traditional Democrats for sure, but even amongst traditional Republicans. I want to shut down the administrative state. I want to declare independence from China. I want to grow our economy by drilling and fracking and embracing energy. And I want to revive national pride in this country. That's not a Republican idea or a Democratic vision. It is a pro-American vision. That's what I stand for. It's why I'm in this race.
I would take issue that when I opposed the war in Iraq and going for weapons of mass destruction that wasn't there, so I ended up being right. You can't compare that to the United States supporting Ukraine defending itself against Russia. So that's
Look, I think there's a myth that Ukraine's actually, I think I was against the Iraq war then, but I'm consistent now. Ukraine is not some democracy that we've now painted it to be. I think this is a regime that really has some serious flaws as well.
Ukraine is in
so I think I respectfully disagree with you.
Strategic place where
I respectfully disagree that I do not think that,
but all right, we can agree to disagree on
Ukraine
that.
is not a NATO ally, and Ukraine doesn't advance U.S. interests. So that's one of the things that's distinctive about my views.
We disagree respectfully on that. Now, NBC is reporting that you were once a recipient of a fellowship for immigrants and children of immigrants from the Soros Foundation. You were awarded the fellowship in 2011 to support your studies at Yale Law School. And the issue is that you, the child of Indian immigrants, are now accusing some immigrants of carrying out an invasion of the United States. And that as president, you would make it more difficult for children of immigrants born here to participate in the political process. The floor is yours to explain how you enjoyed from it, that Sharpton convinced you could run for president, Soros helped you through college. Explain all of this.
Come on. So you know what's really kind of funny about this? That you draw a distinction between legal and illegal immigrants like it doesn't exist. And I think that's a major problem in this country. I think that we need to use our own military to secure our own southern border. Not an armed invasion across somebody else's random border, but across our own border right here in the United States of America. I stand for that. I believe in the rule of law. My parents came to this country legally through the front door, followed the rules, paid their taxes, raised 2 kids. Both of us went on to found companies that helped thousands of Americans. But that also means that your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That's part of what it means to be an American. We believe in the rule of law. So yes, I want to end funding for sanctuary cities, end foreign aid to Mexico and other countries.
You have no problem
illegal immigration.
with helping,
I am a hardliner on. Absolutely.
You have no problem with helping those immigrants that come here and follow the law and become citizens.
I want to help every legal citizen of this country. That's what America First means, putting every American first. And you see how I run this campaign? It's very different. I've gone to the south side of Chicago, to Kensington, in the middle of Philadelphia.
Right.
I haven't called Zelensky, but I have called people in West Maui. America First means every American.
All right, let me ask you this.
But that means you have to come to this country legally, not illegally.
Let me ask you this. You say we run the country with a nation of laws and that we ought to follow the laws. Then how can you and your colleagues stand on a debate stage and say that you would endorse and support for president a man if he was convicted of breaking the law and a felony in Donald Trump? How can you say, I will put a convict back in the White House? And you say that I'm
the way our
supporting
Constitution
the law.
and laws of this country work. First of all, I'm running to be the next president, and I expect to be the next president because I want to reunite this country in a way that we badly need. But I have made a pledge to be on that debate stage, and I intend to keep it because I think the way we do things in the United States of America is that the people of this country get to decide who governs, not the administrative police state. So for better or worse, if it's a guy I disagree with or a guy I agree with,
I'm talking
in this
about
case,
if
Donald
he
Trump, I
was
do agree with most of his
convicted
policies.
of the crime.
But
the question
either
posed
way,
to you all
you got to follow the Constitution.
If he was convicted
you have to follow the Constitution.
Of a crime. If the Constitution is clear,
so the
if he's
Constitution
convicted of
does not eliminate you.
Conduct, he's eliminated. Let me then put it to you this way.
The Constitution governs. I believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution says we have a process for picking presidents in this country. I think we should follow it. I expect to follow it. I expect to be.
So look, here's the thing. If you are convicted of a crime, there's a lot of jobs you can't get after that. You can't become a police officer. So I don't understand how, like, being a police officer is off the table, but yet being the president is on the table still. And also, I think he is, like, not putting 2 and 2 together here. What Al Sharpton is talking about is saying, how could you support a president who actually broke the law, who actually took advantage of the powers that we gave him and used them for his own personal gain? So, that right there is, I think, what the ultimate disconnect is that Vivek thinks Donald Trump is being wrongfully charged, right? And, but in order for you to say that and have that based in fact and logic, you have to actually follow the case. You need to actually read the indictments and understand what he's being charged with, and then come to a logical conclusion. Is it possible? Is it likely? Is it plausible that he committed these crimes? You know what I'm saying? I don't know for sure. I know it looks bad, but And I do know that, at least as of right now, one of the cases is going to be televised. All right. So that is going to be something that I think is going to open a lot of eyes from both sides. All right. Maybe from people who thinks all these charges are bogus. Maybe they'll see there is some credible, evidence to support the fact that he deserved to be charged. Then maybe for the other side, maybe they'll see that this whole thing is actually a witch hunt and it's all for political power. Maybe they'll see that. Who knows, right? The fact of the matter is, we don't know. We weren't there. We don't know what all was going on behind the scenes. When that trial starts and we actually get to see what is going on, that right there is going to be the most transparency we've probably ever had. All right. To see a former president of the United States have to stand trial and have to defend himself in the court of law. We've never seen that before. You know what I'm saying? So I say, let's just wait and see what happens. And I say, if they prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he did take advantage of the American people, then how could anyone still support him and support the idea that he should still be able to hold office, of any office? You know what I'm saying? To say that would be saying that, certain politicians should just be immune to everything. That is not okay. All right. I also wanted to address something else too while we're on the subject. So I've seen a lot of reactors put something like this in their title. Trump has full immunity. It's over. Trump is free. It's all done with, right? Judge rules he has full immunity, right? Look, Trump is being charged in multiple jurisdictions. That means he has multiple judges. Just because one judge, and keep in mind, I don't know what judge, I don't know what case. The only thing I know is the case that's going on right now, that judge did not rule and say he's completely immune. All right. So it is not over. And the way that these reactors were portraying this news, that it's a great thing for democracy, that he's completely immune and no one can touch him. That is not a good thing. Like, you go ahead and try and live in that reality. I don't want to live in that reality with you. All right. I want to live in America that has rules, laws, and regulations for everyone. That the Constitution isn't something that a president can just come in and say, you know what, I like this amendment and this amendment, but this one, no, I don't like that. So I'm just going to ignore that one. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a very slippery slope. If we get to a point to where we'll say, well, the president can do whatever he wants. He wants to run a third term, let him. You know what I'm saying? If we get to that point, that president's going to be able to say, you know what? This group of people, yeah, you don't have rights anymore. We're just going to go ahead and start stripping some of your rights away and see how you'd like that. All right. This is not okay. We do not have an authoritarian government. All right. We have a democracy because the people help contribute to, electing people in their positions of power. All right. So let's keep going.
The next president. But even if it's not me, I will support anyone who follows that process.
If you became president, would you pardon Donald Trump for any of the crimes that he's been indicted for, or if he's convicted?
Now, here's what I want to say about that. The interesting thing here is state crimes are not eligible to be pardoned. All right? So even if someone gets elected and says, I'm going to go ahead and start throwing pardons to Donald Trump. Any state crimes, they can't do it.
On the current facts that we have, he is one of many people that I have identified as someone I would pardon, because I do not think that this sets a...
The trial hasn't even started yet. And this is the thing. And it's like I was saying, he thinks he's just completely justified. He did nothing wrong. The trial hasn't even started yet. And I think it would have been much better to say, you know what? Let's wait and see what the facts reveal as the trial gets going. Then, if it looks like he actually did nothing wrong, then we'll see what happens from there.
A good precedent for our country, where a party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents in the middle of an election. There are Democrats on that list.
Wait a minute, you got 19 people indicted. They're not running all of them. But even before you've heard the evidence, before the trials, you're saying that
trial hasn't even started yet. I think the most we could even know at all is just by reading the indictments, which probably is going to tell you a whole lot to begin with. All right. It's definitely not going to spell out, the strength of the case they have against him. All right. So I completely agree with Al Sharpton on this. Wait until you actually see what's going on first. If it's a total and complete witch hunt, then everyone's going to know. You know what I'm saying? And anyone who does it, then if they're at least able to follow logic and understand it, look at other cases, other similar cases, right? Then you could eventually show them that, look, there's actually no evidence to support these charges, right? If that's the case, then most people would be able to get there and say, okay, this was just for political power. And look, the fact that they're televising it says a lot to me. It says a lot. If it came out and they said, you know what, we're keeping all this secret, we're not going to show anything, right? That does a lot of harm to the credibility of the case itself, right? And that's not a good thing. So the fact that they are wanting to have it recorded and have it televised, that says a lot going towards the credibility of the charges themselves. That's not to say it's completely right and I completely support, because I have no idea. We haven't seen the trial yet. We haven't seen what evidence they have yet. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're going to find out when they go to trial. The prosecutors are going to have to show evidence that supports that he broke the law. You know what I'm saying?
You would prejudge what is going to come out and try and commit to pardoning them.
That's not
Yet
correct.
You claim
that's not correct. I've actually been very clear on this, Reverend. Assuming that the prosecution's statement of the facts in the indictment is the worst version of the facts, then yes, I would. So I waited till I read the indictments cover to cover. In 99% of prosecutions, you and any lawyer will also know this. That's the worst statement of the facts you're going to get for the defense.
But it's not all that's going to come out of trial. You and I know that. That's not all that's going to come out of trial. So what I said is assuming, well, I was very clear at the time. I said, I've read the indictment, and assuming these are the worst facts, then yes, on these facts, I will pardon Trump. Just as, by the way, I've said I would pardon Julian Assange, who, by my best guess, has very different politics than I do. Because, again, we applied a different standard.
That's not what he said when he was first asked the question, though. He didn't say anything about, well, we'll wait and we'll see what the facts reveal. He didn't say that. He said, going by what I know right now, yes, I will pardon him. So, in other words, he's read the indictments and he's formed a biased opinion that he knows exactly what's going on. And at this point, yes, he's going to pardon Donald Trump. But now he says, well, maybe.
Stay on
to
my
Julian
point.
Assange.
Because when you talk
That's
about the law, you've also said that I remember there was the big argument about you saying that people having the right to guns had something to do with slavery. When the Second Amendment was in 1791, slavery didn't end until 1865. I mean, you're very, very...
Well, I can actually share with you something about this. Chief Justice Taney, and you and I probably have some common ground here. In the Dred Scott case, which said that black people could not be citizens in the U.S., shamefully, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court gave his argument for why. He said it would allow black people to own guns in this country. That is shameful. Yes, it is part of our history. But just because some people may be for gun control today, we can't sweep that under the rug.
They didn't do the Second Amendment to help. Blacks couldn't get guns and fight. There were no, they were not fighting to give blacks guns. And when Taney said that, clearly,
so literally, that was the justification in the Dred Scott case for why black people couldn't be citizens.
Dred Scott
and the first
decision was not in
laws
1791, by the way. But one last thing.
It was before the Civil War, as you well know. And I think that we should confront our history and have an open and honest debate about it. That's what makes us stronger as a country.
Until the 13th
we
Amendment, we couldn't
acknowledge our
vote
history
or have
and confront it.
Let me ask you one last question. We're out of time.
Now, I will say this. I think Vivek was a bit disrespectful right here because he could not let Al Sharpton talk without being interrupted during that section right there. You know what I'm saying? Every single time I'm going to try and talk over him constantly, right? So I take some credibility away from him on that point. You know, because it gets really difficult to understand what both people are saying when it's just constantly talking over each other. You know what I'm saying?
That's how we unite this country.
One thing we have in common with Trump is you've been criticized for trafficking in conspiracy theories. So here goes, do you believe, let me ask you this, because you and Trump have both been accused of trafficking conspiracy theories. Do you believe Barack Obama was born in the United States, and do you think it was appropriate for Trump to suggest to otherwise, even as evidence mounted, that the claim was a lie?
I think I have every reason to believe Obama was born in the U.S., and I have never brought up that issue, and I have no idea why we're actually discussing that. But what I have talked about is, for example, Saudi Arabia was absolutely involved in 9/11, despite the fact that our government refused to acknowledge it. That COVID-19 did originate in a lab in China, despite the fact that our government called that a conspiracy theory. That we still haven't seen the transgender shooter manifesto out of Nashville. So those aren't conspiracy theories. Those are conspiracy realities. That's what matters.
Barack Obama was born in Kenya. He's a man that you said was the best president this century. Should he have continued trafficking the Kenya lie about Barack Obama?
Look, I will say, as a presidential candidate before he ran for president, I think he made absolutely the right decision to say that that was a ridiculous theory. Barack Obama was born in the United States. And frankly, I don't think we should dignify the things that aren't true versus talking about the hard things that were labeled conspiracy theories, but that are true now. So I actually believe in truth over theory. I'm tied to facts.
All right. Well, you certainly came, and you knew I was going to fight it out with you, and you stood up. Did about 3 or 4 ducks, threw a couple. We'll do this again. Thank you, 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, guys, look, here's what I think. I think Al Sharpton was prepared for this interview, and I think Vivek was almost prepared for this interview. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to leave it at that. You know, I am, whatever you guys think, I don't care. Put it in the comments. We can have a conversation about it. Right? You know, I am not one that's going to get upset because someone's going to call me wrong or say whatever else. I don't care. You're not going to offend me. You know what I'm saying? I will say, though, you can say that you disagree with someone in a respectful way and then explain why. Right. Simple as that. So, all right. That's it for now, y'all.